Welcome to this 2022 General Election Leaders Debate, hosted by One News New Zealand and TV New Zealand. Someone is listening to it and needs to mute themselves. I am your host, Kevin, and today we have the three major parties here: the New Zealand Liberal Party, the New Zealand First Party, and the New Zealand Labor Party. They are represented by Norman Sutherland, Sir Bloxfire, and Matthew Smith. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for coming to this debate.
Thank you very much for having me.
So today we only have Norman in voice chat. The leader of the New Zealand First Party had trouble joining, and so his deputy, I believe, is here. I think he's also in game chat. So the Liberals and the New Zealand First will be giving their answers in game chat, and Labor will be using voice chat to elevate the level of our debate tonight. Now, it's a very important general election. It's been called early after the Prime Minister asked the Governor General to call an election due to scandals and the lack of confidence. We discussed this in Q+A, an episode produced by TV New Zealand. So first of all, we're going to jump into the debate by allowing each leader to give a 60-second spiel on why you should vote for them and what their three major policy or three major pieces of policy or programs or projects are for the term if they were to be elected. So we will set a timer and I will allow the New Zealand Labor Party to start first. You may start.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow New Zealanders, let's face it, New Zealand is in the dust. Consecutive governments have left our nation in a worse condition than when they found it. Now, New Zealand has been relegated as a second-tier nation with no sense of direction for country or her people. She no longer has a purpose or identity. Instead, she's being used and abused by politicians to bolster their own political power. Our systems are broken. The government doesn't govern, the opposition doesn't hold the government to account, and it is about time a political entity register and offer what is best for all New Zealanders. Thus, the New Zealand Labor Party was reborn. Our comprehensive plan, as seen within this manifesto, is tried and tested. What we need is a strong government with a strong government to lead a strong nation. Labor is ready to govern. Labor has a plan and a motive. We shall execute that plan right away for the sake of our country and for the sake of our people. Party vote Labor, the people's choice.
Thank you, Norman. Interesting there, definitely strong, a new party with some strong opinions. We will now move on to the New Zealand First Party. Are you ready, New Zealand First? Yes? Okay, cool. We will start now. All right, thank you for that, New Zealand First. Continue a party that has been in New Zealand for a while. I mean, seen a recent leadership change, but hopefully it can remain the strong party it has always been. And finally, whoa, my apologies for the sick camera skills. We will move on to the Liberal Party. Are you ready, Liberal Party? Okay, sure. Well, thank you for that, New Zealand Liberal Party and leader of the New Zealand Liberal Party, Matthew Smith. Definitely presented some strong policy initiatives and what you've achieved so far. All around, we saw sound policy from all. Some was in more depth, some was focused on the future. Really great to see. So I think first of all, we're going to jump into a question sent in by a member of the New Zealand public. Now it's a bit of a long question. There's many ways you could look at it. I think we're going to focus on the aspect of acknowledge the question, how you would solve the problem, and how you would ensure that that procedure or policy in place is followed. So the question is, how will you make New Zealand active? How will you change the financial system? How will you restore faith in business enterprise? New Zealand is lacking as an entity for businesses. Many are leaving. Many business owners are starting businesses that remain inactive. There are very few businesses that still operate within New Zealand. What would be your plan to make New Zealand's treasury as strong as, for example, the UK's treasury, which is seen as quite an active department, I guess? We'll start off with the Labor Party first. So, Norman, I will give you a timer for, I think 60 seconds sounds about good. And
I'd tell you, just let me talk. I'm not going to be probably over 60 seconds, but I
okay,
do want to give
that's
an
fine.
in-depth sort of speak.
That's fine.
Thank you very much. Look, firstly, in terms of activity, especially within our financial sector, Labor has a plan for this. Unlike New Zealand First, which hasn't actually published a manifesto yet and just gave us 3 points tonight, which they've been saying for the past 2-3 terms already, Labor has a plan. Firstly, what we're going to do is we're going to establish a centralised national bank and New Zealand Stock Exchange, and we're going to rebuild the business property scheme. The business property scheme basically means that companies from not just New Zealand but from around the world can buy properties within Palmerston North. Right now, it's pretty broken, and what we want to do is fix it, rebuild it, and reform it with group staff, with developers, and with any other entities that we need to talk with as well. The business standards review will also be conducted because, quite frankly, some businesses within New Zealand are not up to scratch. The government will be looking in depth at nearly every business in the country, every media, every financial, every retail business in the country to make sure that they have a high quality of service and product. We're also, as I mentioned before, going to create the New Zealand Stock Exchange to be managed by the Reserve Bank, the government, and group staff, to be simulated in a way. And financial transparency. For too long has our people been completely cut out from the fold of those who know about our financial state. We're going to start reintroducing financial reports for all New Zealanders to see. Now, may I remind you that New Zealand First does not have a policy on this. They have no policies on any sort of finance because they don't even have a manifesto or a plan whatsoever. And as for the Liberals' plan, which was published back in February 2022, well, they've been in government and they've done nothing. In fact, they claimed in their opening statement that, quote, the economy was, quote, already vitalised and that they created the Treasury Bill and the Business Council. Well, the Treasury is basically useless at this point. The Business Council is dead and our economy is not vitalised. This is why we're getting questions in from concerned New Zealand citizens. I hate it to see that Liberal Party over there that hardly has policy to run a third world banana republic, let alone our great country, claim things that are dead and claim things that aren't his. Ladies and gentlemen, New Zealanders, I tell you now, there is only one plan to revitalise our economy and revitalise our activity, and that is Labour's plan. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you for that. So I think I'll move into a few questions with your statement. I'm going to be doing this with everyone. So you first talked about the New Zealand Stock Exchange. Now, I was a member of Doug's cabinet when he introduced this bill. It's quite a complex bill, and so you say you're going to introduce it. How do you intend to introduce it? Governments have tried to introduce it in the past, but
Yeah,
just due
yeah.
to the nature of it and its lack of, I don't know, overall ability to be imported into game, how does the Labor Party, what's your plan of implementing it?
Yeah, and I completely see your point there, Kevin. Firstly, we're going to tackle it in a different way. Firstly, we're going to simulate it. This means that group staff will simulate what they believe in terms of the events that have been taken by the government stocks should be. I've seen this on Discord nations, for example, where group staff have said, right, here's a policy that's been passed by the government. How is this going to affect the stock exchange? From there, we're going to possibly be making bank accounts, maybe in Discord, maybe in game, but also working with group staff and developers as well as experts in this sort of field to pass this.
Do you
We
think,
believe, as the Labor Party, that we cannot do it alone. I'll give you an example of this with the justice sector. Last night I was speaking to Stan. He was a former judge. And I said to him, look, we know as a party that we can't pass things all alone because we don't have the ego to pass things all alone without expert opinion. And that's why we're going to go to experts, and that's why we're going to get the best result for New Zealanders when it comes to this.
so do you think it should be a focal point? So Palmerston North is not in its fullness of state. Jobs are still limited. Development is, probably 60% done. Will this be a main focal point, or is this just something that your party would look to work on, and maybe in 2 to 3 terms there'll be a fully set up, developed stock exchange? Do you think it's
Yeah,
going to be
look,
a one-term
obviously,
policy?
yeah, no, it's not going to be a one-term policy. You'd have to be stupid to believe that it's a one-term policy. But I can tell the people of New Zealand right now that it will take place over the next 2 to 3 terms as long as Labor is in government, because God knows what these inactive parties, these inactive pack of wolves, are going to do to something like a stock exchange.
Thank you. And we'll move on to the New Zealand First Party, Sir Blocksfire. Um, Same question. What are you going to do to boost the New Zealand economy? Business is tanking. We need more business. We need better enterprise. What's the plan of New Zealand First to boost our economy and bring in more business?
Oh, come on. You know they haven't been very clear. You haven't made a plan
I'm
for this
sorry, but
election.
you need to remain quiet while others are speaking.
Apologies.
All right, thank you for that. So, there's one point I'm just going to address first because I think it's going to be a point of heat during the debate, and I thought I would try and move it on so that we don't keep coming back to it. There's been a lack of manifestos released in this election. Now, that's partly due to parties not producing them, but also the Electoral Commission hasn't put their foot down on the need to release manifestos. Labor is currently the only party to have released one. They've released quite a, I would call it a basic manifesto with, they've presented some great ideas, but it's not huge depth, in-depth manifestos we've seen in the past, but they're the only one to present one as of yet. The other parties, while they haven't presented one, the Electoral Commission hasn't really enforced the rule that it is required, but they still have presented policy in their campaign posts. So I think we can move on from that point because I know that it will be discussed more. But we'll move back on to what you stated. So first of all, you talked about the Treasury. You talked about business activity. A Chamber of Commerce. Now we've seen a Chamber of Commerce introduced in many nations, even countries such as the UK, with little to no success apart from few minor meetings, as most businesses operate within a country, or if they're international businesses, they operate without needing a Chamber of Commerce. What would New Zealand first do to ensure the Chamber of Commerce actively produced results and was actually required within the country and made a real difference? Well, thank you for that. Definitely some interesting answers there. Many things to
Well,
consider.
I'm so sorry.
Well,
Will
you can
party
continue.
leaders be debating the points that other party leaders have brought up in each segment?
Yes, not in the
Sure.
first segment, because
Of
it's quite
course.
a long question. I'm going to move to some short questions that we can open up for debate, but I thought
Sure.
we'd just start off. And leader of the Liberal Party, you may begin.
Thank you, Kevin. I do have my microphone now, so apologies for that earlier. Um, the New Zealand Liberals over the past term have enacted successful economic policies. Mr. Sutherland said in his opening statement, with regards to this question, that we're claiming things that are not ours or claiming things that are dead within the ministry. But the fact of the matter is this. The Treasury was not a legitimate department before we actually passed the Treasury bill. And technically, it's not even still one because it hasn't passed the Leg Co and it hasn't been assented by the Governor General. So we had to pass that bill, which actually set up the Treasury as a ministry or a department so it could actually function, let alone do its day-to-day operations. The Business Council was a core part of establishing that bill. And we aim to reduce government intervention, make registration times quicker, and reduce reasons for the deregistration of businesses. That was a very important matter because, as we've all probably seen, governments have their own hidden agendas, or so do certain individuals, and corruption is strife throughout many of the nations. So that was an important part of that bill.
Just to chime in here, quickly.
Yeah.
So, are you saying that your policy for the term is to continue what you've been doing, in terms of setting up the foundations of this ministry? So,
Absolutely.
while others are talking
Absolutely.
about foreign exchange systems and chambers
That's
of
my
commerce,
next point. If
okay,
I
yep,
can
you
get
can
onto that.
continue, yep.
Now, I'm sure we all agree with this fairyland idea of a chamber of commerce, but the fact of the matter is that you cannot establish a functioning chamber of commerce if you haven't got a proper treasury system behind it. So that's the whole point. We've established this treasury system. We're working with faster registrations. We're also at the moment, unfortunately, as I was working on this, a general snap election was called, an intercontinental business exposition / job fair. Big nations were already confirmed in it. People like Malaysia, other smaller allies like Lithuania, with credits to other parties, such as the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. So I thank him for his help in that. That was going to aim to bring a big amount of people, a big amount of businesses together, all in one place, and everybody could show off their business and show off their business's potential. Now, New Zealand was the host, so it would mutually benefit every single country that was participating in it. But as New Zealand was the host, people would be drawn. People would be drawn to our private sector, and people would be incentivized to open up their businesses here if they saw that we were starting to get active again. But I once again say there's no point in setting up a stock exchange or setting up a chamber of commerce if you don't even have a functioning department yet. That's a problem. We admit that. I've made mistakes over this term. I've not done everything perfectly. I haven't done everything as quick as I wanted it to be done. But the fact of the matter is that you cannot continue to progress the ministry without the foundation set. And that is what we have done. We will continue to do it. And once everything is set up in an adequate manner, we will move on to the other details of the ministry, sub-departments, etc., etc. That's all I have to say with regards to that.
Thank you. And I think I already asked a question, and we are going to keep moving on, keep it lively because the debate's getting a bit boring. So next question, we're going to discuss something that I have quite a strong connection to. We're going to discuss the Ministry of Justice because New Zealand's Ministry of Justice is currently dead. Judges are inactive. There's no trials to be held. There's no policy or new policy being presented that's really beneficial. We've seen a few policies being presented, but again, they're just replacing current policies that really won't make a difference. We're going to start with New Zealand first. Just a quick 30 seconds. What are you going to do? What are your first 3 steps in revitalizing the Ministry of Justice? Then we'll open it up to quick 10-second rebuttals, 10 to 15-second rebuttals from other party leaders. So, New Zealand first. How are you going to revive the Ministry of Justice? Start.
might I say that matter has already been talked about.
Okay, so from New Zealand First, so far we've seen revising the bar exam, bar transfers, and revitalising the criminal code. I am going to be the first one to ask a question. So you say you want to revitalise the criminal code. Why? It was only written within the last 12 months by some of New Zealand's most proficient legal minds, myself, Stan, other highly ranked members of the judiciary. It hasn't been used to the fullest extent. The court hasn't been able to use it. Why does it need revitalising? What is it lacking?
Come on, we're talking about the bar exam, not the criminal code.
No, criminal code. Okay, so I'm just going to point that out that when the code was released, that was the point of the code. New Zealand was looking to lessen less serious in-game offences.
And additionally, if you want to change that, you don't need to make a whole new code, Mr. Bloxfire. You can just simply make an amendment.
Okay,
I thought
cool.
that would be more suitable.
So, anyone else? Any other questions? We'll take one more rebuttal or question to the New Zealand First.
Yeah, I'd like to rebut basically his whole points about the Bar Association, the bar exam, etc.
Okay, so what is the rebuttal?
Okay, you want to make transfers easier. I had a very in-depth discussion, very productive discussion the other week with the president of the Bar Association, Stan, as many of you would know. Very great legal mind, very competent in his job. We talked about transfers, and some people were frustrated with some of the rules that were implemented, such as a certain percentage for transfers they had to get in the nation that they were coming from, and stuff like that, vice versa.
So that's fine, but you will be asked the same question, so just more rebuttals to the point.
Oh, okay, more rebuttals. Sorry, that's my bad.
Short rebuttals.
Essentially, I don't know why he said that point because it's already been discussed and the matter's already been settled. Okay. So I don't see the relevance of the point.
We'll move on to the...
Yeah, and I have a point of rebuttal here very
sorry,
quickly.
I'm not taking any more, but we'll move on to the Labour Party.
I'm so sorry. You gave it to the Liberals. Surely you can give it to the Labour Party for a point of rebuttal.
One Labour...
come on. As a point of rebuttal for the New Zealand First Party, what they said, I'll take 10, 15 seconds.
You have 10, 15 seconds. We are running.
All right, thank you very much. And what I can see here from the New Zealand First Party, without any plan whatsoever released to the people of New Zealand, is about their bar exam, their extensive review. I believe that the New Zealand First Party has an absolutely huge ego to believe that they can reform the bar exam to be better than what our professional legal minds have set it as of now.
I absolutely agree with you, Norman.
It is disgusting to think that the New Zealand First Party over here, without any plan whatsoever for our nation, can rock up here to this debate and say, look, we are going to completely reform the bar exam because we think we know better. You do not know better, sir. You have never known better, sir, and you will never know better, sir.
Okay, thank you.
It's as simple as that.
We'll move on
and as,
to the Labour Party.
we'll move on to...
So,
thank you very much.
Ministry's dead. How are you going to solve it?
Ministry's dead. I've talked to people about this, legal experts. In fact, I actually talked to Mr. Stan.
Yeah, no, he doesn't have a last name.
Yeah, he doesn't have a last name, unfortunately. I've been talking to Stan, and I've said, look, we want to reform the Ministry of Justice. How we're going to do this? Because the New Zealand Labour Party believes that we need to work with experts to make things better again. And he said, firstly, don't reform the bar exam. It is well written and it is well done. That is not our problem. You see, New Zealand First has been in government, and so have the Liberals been in government, but they've actually realised, no, we don't have to reform the bar exam. New Zealand First has been in government, and they don't even know that we don't have to reform our bar exam. And that is coming from the top legal experts in this country. We don't have to reform it. There are other things we have to do. We have to reform the Bar Association, the way that we structure it. We have to reform all of our, not necessarily all of them, but maybe a couple of our key structures within the Ministry of Justice. I was talking to him and he said maybe we have to look into reforming the Solicitor General role, for example, which is currently held by Matthew J. Ainsley.
I've also been contacted about this, and I agree with you on that point, Norman,
Yeah,
with respect to the Solicitor General.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the fact of the matter is, New Zealand First has been in government this whole time, and they've done nothing about it. And then they come to the stage now and say, "Oh, we've got a plan," but you don't. I mean, New Zealand First has been in government now for the past 3 terms, under Arthur Sutherland, Edward Halbert, and now this excuse of a government, which both the parties beside me have been a part of, where no progress has been made, especially in the justice sector. Especially in the justice sector, where we're getting next to no cases.
Might I jump in on that?
Hold on.
It is the Labour Party's time.
I'll just continue to go on here about the criminal code. And I actually talked to Stan about the criminal code as well, and he believes that needs complete reforming, if not complete replacing, because New Zealand doesn't really have a criminal code in the first place.
I'm currently writing one with him, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. We currently don't have one. So when I hear New Zealand First going, we're going to reform it, well, what are you reforming? You're reforming a blank piece of paper. In fact, that looks like the piece of paper that this government has in terms of its accomplishments, because there is nothing that this government has done. And I think the Law Society of New Zealand and everyone involved with law in this country should be ashamed of this government, its members and its leaders, for a lackluster term and shocking leadership. So what is Labour going to do? The following. 1, we are going to work with the Ministry of Justice to form a better Ministry of Justice that is more active and more useful. We're going to work with people such as Stan. We're going to work with people such as Kevin Cowan, my good friend over there in front of the TVNZ podium. We're going to work with people such as Matthew J. Ainsley and Arthur Sutherland, who are experienced. We are going to work with them to form a better Ministry of Justice. So then we can introduce things like harsher sentences for gun misuse to combat corruption, because corruption is a big issue, especially under this government, which both the parties beside me have taken part in. This nation needs changing from the ground up, especially with the Ministry of Justice, and Labour will do just that. Thank you, Kevin.
So there is a current Criminal Code Act. It's 17 pages long. It's quite extensive. It was written by Stan and myself. It's still enacted. What is this not up to standard? I mean, it was.
Can I please say something very important here?
Here's a question to Labour. Yeah, sure. You'll have your time. When it's your turn to speak. So you said
look, in terms of changing the criminal code,
it's a 17-page document. It's not a blank.
It's a 17-page document. That's pretty much the equivalent of a 17-page document. That is what I said. If it didn't pick up, then I'm deeply apologise, because I was approached by Stan, and Stan said this needs reforming, this needs changing, and I completely agree with Stan. But what I tried to get across here is the plan, the supposed plan that New Zealand First wants to reform the bar exam. It does not need reforming. I've been told by multiple legal experts that it does not need reforming. And this is just showing once again that a government party cannot stand up for the people of New Zealand and, quite frankly, cannot govern. Are we surprised? No. Are the people surprised? No. Polling is showing that the people aren't surprised and that the Labour Party is taking over. Now, you don't necessarily always trust polling, but I tell you what, with the way that this government has acted this term, by Jobs, you should be scared.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions for Norman or rebuttal on
his... Yeah, I'd like to jump in. Not necessarily a rebuttal, but just a couple of points.
Well, then we can move on to your
call it a rebuttal then. It is technically a rebuttal, so... Okay. With regards to the criminal code, one is currently being written with both me and Stan. It's just an amended one, yeah. That's in the works. However, unfortunately, snap election was caused, so that's on halt. Until those polls are closed and the results are released. But otherwise, nothing more than that.
Okay, so we'll move on to the Liberal Party. Do you have any more plans or anything else that you'd be looking at? You've mentioned you're in the process of writing code. If you're elected, would you continue to write this, or would you provide it to the party elected? What's the plan?
Yeah, so Liberals are not focused on playing party politics and factional politics. We definitely hand over the criminal code, no doubt about it. Plus, it was Stan's base. He's written the majority of the bill. It is his works, so he has the right to do whatever he deems fit with that draft legislation. Now, furthermore, it's sort of an agreement with Norman, but it's also a little bit of a rebuttal. I've talked to people, and basically people high up in the Ministry of Justice. Essentially, they think that there is no use in reforming any of this until New Zealand itself has got activity. They think the judiciary is dead, and nothing is going to fix it unless we fix our overall activity. So once again, it's similar to the Treasury, but overarchingly, we need to make sure that we ramp up activity more widespread within New Zealand before we start to focus on stuff like attaining more barristers within New Zealand. But otherwise, I have nothing else.
Any rebuttal or questions for Matthew?
Yeah, I just want to quickly talk to Matthew saying that the Liberals are not going to play party politics. Well, it seems that the Liberals also aren't really going to play on the justice sector either. Their policy says as following as of February 2022, quote, strict and harsh sentences on holders of political office who commit serious offences, reduced sentences for less serious crimes, harsh sentences for more serious crimes, and more opportunities for barristers. Now, the Liberal Party has been in government this term. None of these have been passed, especially the first one, which I think is very important in our nation, and its trust of politicians. That being strict and harsh sentences on holders of political office who commit serious offences. Well, actually, this government has had multiple people who have committed serious offences, and quite frankly, nothing's been done about it because our court system is in jeopardy. Yet, we have a Liberal Party here who is claiming that they are going to do all these things. They've been in government and they haven't done it. So I tell the people of New Zealand that if you want a party to trust that is actually going to keep its word, unlike New Zealand First, who doesn't actually have a plan in the first place, or the Liberals, who don't do their plan, don't execute their plan.
Well, might I add that bill was going to be presented this weekend if a general election wasn't called. It was called the Political Reform Bill 2022, and it was going to be presented to the House.
Prime Minister. You could have talked to the Prime Minister and said, hey, lay off for another few days so we can go ahead and pass this vital piece of legislation.
I couldn't, as I could not access Wi-Fi during those few days.
And what else? Reduce sentences for less serious crimes, harsh sentences for more serious crimes, and more opportunities for barristers. There are none of those. There are no more opportunities.
That was being done throughout the criminal code.
There are less. It's being done. It isn't done, and we were more than halfway through the term. We were nearly ending the term.
Yes, but we weren't finished the term, were we?
We were about to. In fact, what did you pass in the Liberal Party? Nothing. None of your policy was passed. What was passed?
It was the Treasury Bill 2022. I thought we touched on this subject earlier.
We did. Is it alive? No, it's dead. There's nothing to do with the Treasury.
You just said we didn't pass our policy. We did pass our policy.
It's dead. It might as well not be passed because it's not going.
Well, I think you have to pass policy in the first place to get anything.
You have to.
But well, I mean, move on. We are moving on now.
No, I need to jump in here. You need to make sure you have an act to be able to do that. So let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. But I mean, like that was passed early, and it's not doing anything right now. Now is it?
Well, maybe because it needs to get assented, and the LegCo would be alive. Then maybe it could get through, and we could start our plan.
I've seen the LegCo alive. It just hasn't passed this piece of legislation. All right, let's continue on.
Yep. So I mean, sorry, New Zealand First. We've had quite a big rebuttal here. I think I'm going to limit it to only questions asked about policy, not statements anymore. We're going to move into something that connects to this. So with increases in, you want to look at sentencing, changes in the criminal code, people have to enforce this. New Zealand Police. Now, I mean, currently SSUs are not very active, but almost police officers, almost dead. I think, Norman, the police commissioner, is a member of your party.
Yep, that's true.
So we're going to need to find a new commissioner.
Absolutely.
Is the plan to increase activity within the police force to ensure that in-game crimes are actually being prosecuted, because many governments have tried and there's been a lack of cooperation, but a lack of policy. So how are you really going to move forward? How are you going to change this? We'll start with the Labor Party, and I will be setting a timer. You will have 60 seconds to discuss your policy on this.
Yeah, look, firstly, our public prosecutors are in a state of disarray. The Labor Party has a clear plan on this. Firstly, we're going to bolster the New Zealand police force with new technology and harsher recruitment tactics. This government has seen barely any recruitment when it comes to our police force, and barely any activity. And of course, that's going to come back to business as well as finance, as well as activity within the nation. A poll was conducted by Roy Morgan saying that activity and parliamentary and internal affairs, so affairs all in all, make more than 50%, nearly 60% of all of New Zealand's problems, according to voters. Something needs to be done about that, and that will be done through our New Zealand Police. What else are we going to do with New Zealand Police? Well, we're going to pass the police professionalism exam, because police need to be professional, and I believe that New Zealand Police are mostly a good bunch. We're also going to pass the police organisation bill, because right now, police's structure has been unofficial, confusing, and unclear. And we also need to make sure what power the government has over New Zealand Police, and that's what we're going to do. And just our last point before I quickly finish, we're going to introduce non-lethal weapons for police. We're not going to take away firearms, but we are going to introduce and encourage the use of non-lethal weapons. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you. Any questions for that?
Rebuttals? Can we do rebuttals?
Just questions.
Just questions. What type of non-lethals are you seeing to implement, seeing as there's already pepper spray, batons, X26 tasers that are all issued to general duties?
Yeah, sure. And we're going to be looking at things such as things like, pretty much those, except maybe to an extent that they're not as, I guess you can say, exploitable by the police, because I think
I
it's
don't
a bit unrealistic.
understand what you're saying, because they're already issued
they're a
for
bit
the police.
I'll tell you, for example, pepper spray, for example, can be pressed again and again and again. Not to mention, they're not actually being completely, and the main point of this was the fact that we want to encourage it as well. Right now, they're not being encouraged.
They are.
When you go down,
They certainly are within the New Zealand Police's internal policy.
When you,
Not a
well,
debate,
internal
question.
policy is different to the way that it's currently being executed. You go down to Palmerston North, they're all shooting guns. We need to make sure that they're not just shooting guns willy-nilly, and they're actually using the non-lethal weapons, yeah?
Okay, thank you for that. We're going to move over to the Liberal Party now. Oh, no, we have another question from New Zealand First. Yep, we'll take that.
Sorry, what would the police professionalism exam entail? Firstly, we're going to be working, as it says, with officials high up in the police that know what to say. However, it will be things like procedures, weapons, general police sort of facts and what to do in different situations that are more common down in Palmerston North. Things like robberies, things like pullovers for speeding, and weapons. When that eventually takes place, then we'll start introducing harsher punishments for the misuse of firearms.
Okay, so we'll now just move on to the Liberals. You yourself, Matthew, I know have had a lot to do with the police.
Yep.
You know their current state. You know they're going to lose a commissioner.
Yep.
If the Labor Party win enough seats, well, technically they should have already lost it. He's a member of a political party. So
Sure.
there's no commissioner currently. Who do you think? Do you think we have the people here in New Zealand to fill that role, and then how they're going to improve police activity?
So I'm not at much liberty to talk about the commissioner spot, as I've already had internal talks within the police force about that. So I can't speak too much on that. But yes, there are definitely suitable candidates within New Zealand that are already being considered for the spot of commissioner. Now, moving on. All these policies on the surface and on paper look great. I'm sure we'd all agree that we want our police to be professional, and so on and so forth. But that also stems into issues like the criminal code. Sentences are weak on harsh offenders. Our firearm laws are not being implemented properly. It's allowing easy access that shouldn't be happening to criminals. And they're able. That is why the police is on edge so much of the time. If you talk to all of them, you can ask them why they're always ready to use their lethal. It's because every corner they turn, every person they run into, they're getting shot by. So we have to focus on that issue before we get to stuff like non-lethal. Now, secondly, moving on. We all remember the travel ban that was implemented on Australia Day between Australia and New Zealand. yeah, let's. But I'm afraid we have to dive into this. Sorry. Um,
No,
if
fair
you
enough.
once again talk, I am a superintendent within the police force. And I was the head, or still am the head actually, of the Royal New Zealand Police College. In the space of 2 days, I brought in about, I believe it was 6 to 8 new officers, and they were all part of the Australia group as well. Now, within a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, we had lost all of them because of this travel ban. We had about 20 to 25 active officers at one point, and during January, we were having 8 to 9 police officers on at once. We had not seen that in such a very long time, and it was an immensely active force. It was an immensely active force. It was a strong force, and it did its job. But due to the travel ban, numbers have declined. If you have a look at that survey, and that's an understatement, numbers have sharply and steeply declined. We need to ramp up our employment scheme. We need new legislation for things such as traffic and traffic offences, speeding, things like that, and we need to implement tools such as radar guns. We need those obviously so they can enforce laws such as speeding, but we also need it so that activity is brought to Palmerston North. Police officers don't have that much to do right now. They want to protect their communities, but there's no real way to do it because all they have to do is use their lethal most of the time because everybody is flouting the law. So I think we need to fix our activity, and then we need to focus on smaller issues such as tools because that's kind of a non-issue. Right now it is an issue, but it's a very small issue compared to the larger scale issues that we're currently facing. So that's all I have to say with regards to that.
Sure. I've got 3 questions for the leader of the Liberal Party.
You
Sure.
can ask one.
Thank you very much.
Just ask me your best one. We'll combine them all. I don't
Sure. Why aren't these policies that you bring up now actually in your plan, in your manifesto or supposed manifesto that was made back in February 2022?
During February 2022, the police force was in a better state and was not in need of this. Now it is truly in need of this. So I
And
suppose
why
that
that didn't answer my question. Why isn't it in your supposed manifesto?
because it wasn't relevant at the time. So you got me.
But
I will have to
but
update it.
surely you have to make a manifesto for each election. Why isn't it in your manifesto? Is
No,
it
we
because
did
you didn't make a
discuss-
manifesto
we
this
did-
election?
We did.
We've already
discuss this
yeah, we
earlier.
already
The
have
Electoral
discussed this
Commission hasn't
question.
enforced it, so therefore we can't say it is enforced.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, surely for the sake of the people of New Zealand, I'm not talking about enforcement, but surely they should know, your points, whether that be the Electoral Commission stamping down on it or not. Why isn't it in there? Is it because you haven't been bothered to make a manifesto
No,
this election?
definitely not. So what our document is, I don't want to do this because it's just promoting internal policy documents, but we do a core policies and values that are broader points, and then those broader points get divulged into talks like this, and then we explain those points and what they contain. So that I knew that this debate or a debate was coming up as well, so I thought that I'd use this opportunity to explain a lot of our policies, seeing as all the questions seem to be covering every single ministry. But
Fair enough.
I would be more than happy to add that into the document if you would want.
Yep.
Yeah,
and
there
New
are a
Zealand
few things that you
First
do have to.
had a question. If you'd like to ask it, New Zealand First.
I did not say that. I said they were part of Australia. They were just citizens at the time, most of them.
Okay, so we're going to move on to final question before we do.
Let him finish. I do want to answer his
Okay.
question. How do you mean directly? That's quite subjective. Well, I am the head of the college, so yes, I do it myself. Yes, that is how I did it all back then. I ran the exams, I ran the courses, I ran everything. It's always how I've done it. That's always how I will do it.
I guess to an extent, the fact that one person, that this good superintendent here, or maybe just to a couple people it's left to
Yeah,
keep a police force alive is disgusting.
but
And to know that it is the job of the government to make sure it remains active and it isn't, that shows sort of the caliber of the government that we've had so far.
Well, Norman, I absolutely agree with you, but to be honest, this is all politics aside. The pure reason, with regards to the decline of the police force, was because of that travel ban. That killed the
Yeah.
force.
Which was
so
was
now,
also endorsed by the government.
regardless of who the party is who takes government, it's important now that they let the police force internally manage, but they also give them employment boosters. So stuff like advertisement schemes or employment schemes, and even things such as if you're a police officer, say in, let's call it a random country, Fiji. If you're a police officer in Fiji, you can automatically transfer to a recruit in New Zealand, and vice versa. If you're a police officer in New Zealand, you can transfer to Fiji as a recruit. That would also be an incentive to boost our force again. Little things like that will make a difference with just a couple of officers is what we need at the moment. All politics
that
aside.
makes sense as well. Yeah, that makes sense.
yep. So we will move on to our final speaker for this question. Or has ever no? Yes, New Zealand first. Have you gone? No, that's what I thought. Okay, we'll move on to your response to the inactivity of the police and its future forward.
I see the Labour leader is struggling to contain his excitement.
Yeah, bro, it's just going up and down.
I wonder what you mean by that.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for what New Zealand First has presented?
Not particularly, no.
Yeah, well, I do.
Sure.
And it's basically the same question that I directed to the member of the Liberal, the leader of the Liberal Party. Why haven't the people of New Zealand been told about this before? Well, I mean, fact of the matter is, New Zealand First is on zero campaign advertisements. They have put forward no plan to the people of New Zealand until this election leaders debate coverage. Why haven't you heard about it before? And why are you telling us now rather than, when you were asked to do it? or for the sake of New Zealanders as early as possible. No, we haven't settled this. At least the Liberal Party has a wee bit of a plan. You haven't even done one campaign. One campaign.
Look, I have to jump in here and agree with Norman. All you're saying is just waffling. You're not actually specifying about
Words.
any of your points. You're just saying broad things that don't have any specific meaning behind them. How can you give
Yeah,
voters any confidence
not
when you're not
how.
explaining what you're going to do?
You haven't said how you're going to do it. You haven't told
Me
the
and
people of New
Norman
Zealand
criticise each other, but
anything.
at least we know what we want to do and what we plan to do. You have no idea.
None whatsoever. I mean, how are your party members feeling knowing that your party hasn't even released a single policy publicly yet? Hasn't released one campaign message yet? And yet you're claiming here, oh, we're going to make a more advanced manifesto than all of you. Well, why haven't you even had an ad yet?
So we're
Not one policy yet.
gonna allow New Zealand First some time to provide an answer to these questions, and then we really must be moving on.
Come on. It doesn't take that long to come up with even just one policy.
Have to remain quiet.
That's shocking. That is shocking.
It's not your time. Okay, thank you for the response. So we're going to move on now. Due to time constraints, we're sadly not going to be able to cover our last question that we were hoping to cover. We're just going to allow 60 seconds for each leader to summarize what they've talked about in this debate, anything they really want to say. And since New Zealand First just spoke, we're going to allow them to finalise theirs first, then the Liberals, and then we'll finish with the Labor Party. So, New Zealand First, your time starts now. Thank you for that, New Zealand First. We'll now move on to the Liberal Party. Let me just set your timer.
No problem.
There you go. You may start.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. So over tonight, I've demonstrated and I've explained and I've shown what we've done. It's there in the books. We've passed fundamental legislation. Fundamental legislation was also in the works, but unfortunately, that snap general election did cut it short. We plan to bolster activity within New Zealand. That is the main purpose of this election. If you want this country to thrive again, we need people to get back into New Zealand. We need to create jobs. We need to boost our police force and we need to bring confidence back to the people of the country. We've demonstrated that we have very sufficient economic, internal affairs, justice plans, and more. And sorry, I'm stumbling a bit there. And we want to make sure that we hold our politicians to account throughout all the terms within New Zealand. The choice is clear this election. Vote the New Zealand Liberals. Thank you.
And thank you for that. Definitely covered all areas of their debate today and all policy. Now we will move on to the Labor Party. I'll just start your timer and do
Thank
ask
you very
that
much.
you keep, don't
Oh,
shout
of course,
into
keep
the
in
mic.
time.
No, don't shout into
No,
the mic.
my deepest apologies. I'll try not to.
All good. There, when you're ready, you can start.
Thank you very much. We've seen the New Zealand First Party say that they're going to seek to clean up this mess with, quote, fresh new policies and politicians you can trust and clean up after the, quote, disastrous travel ban. Even though they have been in government for the past 3 terms, they seek to clean up their own mess with their own policies, with their own politicians that you can't trust, and a travel ban that they allowed and supported. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow New Zealanders, the choice is clear. You can either go with the New Zealand First Party, who have no policies whatsoever, the New Zealand Liberal Party, which is somewhat all right, or the New Zealand Labour Party, with fresh new faces, with actual fresh new policy that is actually wanting to clean up the mess that New Zealand First and this past government, with the Liberals included, have put us in. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow New Zealanders, party vote Labour, the people's voice.
I just realised my mic was on mute for that whole time. Discussed the debate and awarded the debate winner to the Liberal and Labor Party, who both had strong policy, lacking in separate areas, but overall strong debate, and thank you for everyone who assisted in it.